Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Info Tap. I'm glad you made it. There was some big changes that took place last year, and they affect how we utilize our benefits. Now, the VA put out information on this, and I wanted to throw it out there as a gentle reminder as we're getting into the middle of spring and then into the summer here of 2025, which is an important time frame. So before I do that though, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe, share with a friend, all that good stuff. I really appreciate it very much. And every thumbs up and every minute really does help the video get more reach, which is really what we're trying to do. All right, so most of the topics that you're going to see, on channels like this are around VA specific benefits and most often disability compensation, although there are many other benefits. One of the benefits that we do have as veterans is the VA home loan. Now, the headline here is what real estate industry changes mean for VA home loan borrowers. So there were some major changes. I'll give kind of the overview. We'll jump into it. I've had David Piatek from VA Housing Education on many times. Check him out. His information will be in the description as well as the comments if you have any real estate questions. Look, at the end of the day, if you're thinking about buying, refinancing, taking cash out, purchasing something else, whatever it is, he is a good brain to pick, and he is willing, which is also good. So take advantage of the resource of David Piatek over at VA Housing Education. Again, link in the description and in the comments. So what had happened was the real estate industry was one way. Then they ended up, the National Association of Realtors got sued and they lost. And essentially what it did was say, hey, look, the burden of selling a home shouldn't squarely be on the back of the seller. In other words, the commission for buyer's agent and selling agent or listing agent shouldn't all come from the seller. Now, that's the way that it was for years, right? You buy a house, you paid no commissions. All the commissions were paid for by the seller, and that was great. But things have now changed. So now, essentially, what they're looking at is, look, you can't force the seller to do it. They have to negotiate that with the buyer, not with the agent that's listing the house. So before, it used to be, hey, you want to sell your house? Well, we're going to do whatever, 2%, 3%, 2.5% to the listing agent, and what should we give as an incentive for the buyer's agent to show your house, right? If you do a 1%, nobody's going to show your house. If you do a 2%, maybe they will. And if you do a 3%, then everybody's going to show your house. If you do 4%, you're going to get a flood of people trying to really get your house sold because there's more of an incentive to the buyer's agent. All right, so that's the way it used to be. So now that's gone, and now 3% or 2%, whatever, list your house, that's done. Now the buyer, you, the veteran, if you're looking to buy a home, now you have to negotiate your fees or commissions to either the buyer's agent that you choose to work with to show you homes, or you could contact the listing agent directly and try to finagle something out that way and wrap it all into one. Depending on what state you're in and where you're at and the different brokerages and so forth, some agents are not allowed to have dual representation, meaning they can't represent the seller and you as the buyer. Others don't care. They're like, yeah, you can represent both and you can charge both. And others might say, hey, look, you can represent the seller as a client, and you can represent the buyer as a customer. A little bit of a different fiduciary responsibility, if you will, but they can help you with the paperwork and so forth. So let's jump into this. It says, what real estate industry changes mean for VA home loan borrowers? Again, this came out, I don't know, maybe 8 months ago or so, and just wanted to kind of do this as a recap for you. Recently, one of the largest real estate professionals trade organizations, which is the National Association of Realtors, or NAR for short, has been in the news regarding a settlement concerning buyer broker compensation. Effective August 17th, 2024, the National Association of Realtors has reached a settlement in a class action lawsuit that resulted in changes to buyer broker fees and real estate transactions. Here's how that could affect veterans and service members using VA home loan benefits. Now, there may have been changes after the fact. If I remember any, I'll mention them. But as of this date, August of 2024, when they pushed this out, this is exactly what it was. So what are the changes? The settlement will require two big changes in how buyers and sellers are negotiating services from a buyer's agent. Number one, when agents list homes on the multiple listing service, the MLS platform, they will no longer be able to include the buyer's agent's compensation, which is what I was talking about, right? So, hey, look, we'll throw 3% out to the buyer's agent so the agents come and show your house. That goes away. The MLS is the listing program that buyers, brokers, and listing brokers use to share information about properties for sale. So it's basically the whole catalog of homes that are for sale and or sold or pending or what have you, with all of the information, even the behind the scenes. So it's kind of like Realtor.com, but on steroids with even extra information. So buyers will be required to enter into written agreements with realtors before touring a home, and the agreement must include terms about their own agent's fees. Now, again, from my understanding as, dude on the internet, so check with your local agents, but if you want to go view 6 homes that are listed by different agents, right, you could work with one buyer's agent who's going to represent you, and you can go look at these 6 homes. You'd enter into an agreement with them, and you would enter into an agreement on how much you're going to pay for their services. Now, the end result of that is you could negotiate a seller concession in your contract to absorb those fees if you wanted to. Now, there's no guarantee that the seller is going to accept it. Just depends on what your offer looks like, right? And then your other option is you could call each one of the 6 listing agents and say, hey, I'm a buyer. I'm not represented. I'd like to come look at your house. I'm a potential buyer. And then they can meet you there and open it for you. All right. Moving on. Why does this change matter for veterans using the VA Guaranteed Home Loan benefit? Historically, veterans could not pay, and this is the important part. So as a protection for veterans using a VA loan, there were certain fees you could not pay. And it was based on industry kind of standards, right? So let's kind of dive into that here. So it says, historically, veterans could not pay buyer broker fees when purchasing a home with a VA guaranteed loan. You could not pay the buyer's agent's fees yourself using a VA loan. Why? Well, because it was customary that the seller would pay all of those. But since this lawsuit, things have now changed. So in June, VA announced an update to help ensure that veterans using the VA Home Loan Guaranteed home loan benefit remain competitive buyers. Specifically, eligible veterans, active duty service members, and surviving spouses who use their VA home loan benefits can pay for certain real estate buyer broker fees. Now, this would be as of buying a home, as of August 10th, 2024. This update was intended to ensure VA's programs continue to promote access to home ownership. So, on its face, it kind of sounds weird, right? The VA used to not allow veterans to pay buyer broker fees. You just weren't allowed to. You could still buy the home. You just weren't allowed to pay that fee, which was great because it was a cost you did not have to incur. Now, you are allowed to pay that fee, which means your closing costs would be potentially higher. Now, it is important to understand that in some cases, it might be advantageous for you to be a strong buyer. You find a house that you love, it's great, there's 3 offers, and the seller concessions, right, a credit towards your closing costs is 0 on everybody else's offers. It would be not advantageous for you to come in at the same asking price and ask for money back to cover your realtor fees. They're probably not going to go with you. Now, the only way you could kind of hedge that is if there's room in the appraised value. Let's just use easy numbers. It's a $500,000 house, and the appraisal seems like it would be fine, and you pushed it to, we'll just say $525,000, and you said, hey, we'll buy it for $525,000, and we want $25,000 to come back in a seller concession towards closing costs. And again, depending on what state you're in, and again, look, I used to be in real estate. Haven't been for a very long time. Talk with a real estate professional in your area, a realtor on that, and talk with David Piatek over at VA Housing Education to get the lowdown. But the verbiage can be different in which state you're in. It could just be concessions, could be seller credit, could be seller credit specifically toward recurring and non-recurring closing costs. So there's a whole bunch of verbiage that you want to make sure you get right. All right, let's move on. For additional information about the update, there is additional information in the VA's Loan Guarantee Service resources page, which, by the way, David, again, is the expert in this, and this is his wheelhouse for sure. So take advantage of that. What this means for home buyers, okay? Home buyers will now be required to sign a written agreement with their agent before touring a home. This contract must explain the buyer-broker fee as negotiated by the home buyer and the agent, and the specific services that will be provided by the agent. The buyer's written agreement must include the following 4 components regarding the buyer-broker fee, which could be substantial, right? If it's 1% on a $500,000 house, well, that's $5,000. If it's 3%, that's $15,000. So the buyer's written agreement must include these 4 things: prominent disclosure of the amount or rate of compensation the real estate agent will receive and how this amount will be determined. Next one is compensation must be objective, must be a dollar fee, a flat fee, a percentage, or an hourly rate, and not open-ended. The next one here is a term that prohibits the agent from receiving compensation for brokerage services from any source that is over the amount agreed to with the buyer. Last one, a prominent statement that broker fees and commissions are fully negotiable by the home buyer and agent involved and not set by law. All right, moving on. The seller may agree to offer compensation to your agent, which is what I had talked about with the concessions, right, or closing cost credit. So the seller of the home, right, may agree to offer compensation to your agent, but the offer cannot be shared on the MLS, the multiple listing service. So this would be basically something that you would have to talk with the listing agent about, or your buyer's agent would need to talk to the listing agent about and see what sort of offers can be accepted with that. So buyers may also ask sellers to pay the buyer's agent's compensation, which I also talked about, even if the seller's agent did not advise seller paid compensation on a platform other than the MLS. Buyers can still accept concessions from the seller up to 4% of the appraised value of the property. What that means is you, as the buyer, using a VA home loan, can receive up to 4% of the appraised value from the seller to use toward your closing costs, recurring, non-recurring. So the difference between those, a non-recurring would be your title fee, your agent compensation, your appraisal, your recording fee, processing fee, loan fee, that type of stuff. Your recurring closing costs are things like your prepaid interest, because you're gonna keep paying interest on your loan. Your taxes, your real estate taxes, your homeowner's insurance, those are going to be recurring aspects. So you could receive up to 4%. Again, to use easy numbers, $500,000 loan amount or purchase price, $500,000 appraised purchase price. Well, 4%, right? $20,000. So moving on, it says also because buyer's agents cannot receive compensation over the amount negotiated with their client, any seller paid offers of compensation higher than the amount negotiated by the buyer may be negotiated as a seller concession to defray the buyer's closing costs. What this means for home sellers. Sellers can offer compensation to buyer's brokers. However, the seller's agent must clearly disclose the document the seller's approval of the payment or offer that will be made to the buyer's broker. The compensation amount cannot be included on the MLS listing. The seller's agent may advise or advertise the listing on other social media, flyers, and websites other than the MLS platform. Sellers can still offer buyer concessions up to 4% of the appraised value of the property, such as offers to pay closing costs. What can veterans do? And why would they do that, first of all? Depends what the market's doing, right? If it is a buyer's market, well, the seller needs to be aggressive and try to get their house sold, right? So they might do that. If it's a seller's market, then maybe they don't need to do that, right? So just depending on the market and the individual needs of the seller, if they need to sell in a hurry or not. The last little piece here, what can veterans do when finding an agent to work with? Make sure to ask questions about compensation and understand what services are included. It is also your right to negotiate the fees prior to signing the written contract. You should work with your agent to understand how the VA guarantee home loan benefit applies to your situation. And I would argue talking with your lender is probably even more important than the realtor with regard to your VA home loan. So again, David Piatek, he is there for you with any questions you have. Reach out to him with a full range of choices when both buying and selling a home. VA remains committed to providing guidance and policies that ensure veterans are not disadvantaged in the home buying or selling process. VA will continue to monitor how the settlement affects the real estate market and keep veteran buyers competitive in the housing market. And that's the end of it. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you. Have a great one. And remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.